Ah, sí. Olvidé decirles que mi papá es oftalmólogo. Y que en aquella época
I should be
pensó que yo era
practicing my
la manera en la
listening,
que
you're
Dios lo
right.
había
I
elegido
can't
para...
use subtitles forever.
診察を繰り返そう。
Hang on. Did I
薬
just change the language?
Bocado. Cuando reconoció que no iba a poder curarme,
No,
prometió
I'm
que
just
iba a
that terrible.
Has that ever happened to you, where you decide to finally turn off subtitles, but then it sounds like an entirely different language? Or maybe you've had the experience of listening to something and thinking, wow, that was super complicated. I didn't understand anything. But then you look at the text and realize that you know every single word. And even going back to listen again makes it sound a lot more normal. Why didn't you understand the first time? What's going on there? To sum it up, it's probably your listening ability. Your reading is way better than your listening, which is why you're having these kinds of problems. And so today, we're going to dive into why that's happening and what you can do to fix it. Basically, every learner struggles with listening at some point. It's really hard, and there's a lot of reasons for that. The first is that there's a lot of general ambiguity in listening. When you're reading, you can look at a word and see the word. It might have a couple of different definitions, but they're all under the same dictionary entry. You know what the word is. But with speaking, there is a lot more things that can be going on, potentially dozens of different aspects to listening that can just make things a lot more fuzzy and ambiguous. Maybe the word is being pronounced weird, or is being blended into the words around it, or a sound skipped entirely. All of those things can happen, and they do, very frequently, which makes listening harder. Pretty much all of this stems from human language's tendency to conserve energy. We need to be able to express basically everything and not be too cumbersome to make it an actual usable language. And so we end up making shortcuts all the time. Take a simple phrase like "umina," which is a very normal, common phrase in spoken English, but you pretty much never write it down, although you can. A lot of people might see this as lazy speaking or doing something that's outside the confines of the official proper language, but it's really just people cutting out all of the extra stuff in the language that isn't really needed to be completely clear. Everybody knows what umina means when they hear it in a real sentence, and we'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. And the reason we're able to do this is that we as humans are really good at filling in the blanks in language. There's lots of stuff that we can figure out from context, like what he or she is referring to in a sentence, or just filling in the gaps of what somebody said when they're missing some sounds or blurring things together or whatever it might be. As I'm speaking, you're probably hearing individual words in your mind despite there being no spaces in between those words. You just know where they naturally fall. A whole other problem entirely are the sounds used in the language. Humans can produce a very wide range of speech sounds, ow, but it's very unlikely that your native language and your target language use exactly that same small subset, which makes listening even harder. And then you also have to learn how those sounds fit together in your target language, because even if the two languages share a lot of sounds, it's not guaranteed that they have the same rules about how the sounds affect each other, what goes where, and that sort of thing. A classic example for Japanese speakers or learners is that in Japanese, there is no real distinction between an L sound like a L and a R sound or like a ara sound, like a tapped R sound. But for an American, that ara is going to be used in a word like butter or better, but that L is going to be used in something else. And they're not the same, but they're also not even an R. It's a whole thing that if you didn't know about would be pretty weird when you're listening to words that are suddenly pronounced differently than you thought they were. You're potentially missing a little or a lot of nuance and clarity in the language if you could just hear the sounds better. And going back to what I said about other speakers, different dialects and accents and even people have different ways of using those rules or sounds or putting their words together and so many other things. If you only focus on learning the by-the-book pronunciation rules, it's going to be really difficult when it comes time to talk to real people. Plus, speaking of those real people, they speak really freaking fast. When you're actually using the language and not in the comfort of your own immersion environment, you can't just keep repeating things and going back. You have to understand in real time, right now. When you're reading stuff, you have plenty of time. Those words aren't going anywhere. You can look them up, you can really think about them, you can go make a cup of coffee and come back. But if you're listening in a real life situation, or you can't pause, or you don't want to keep having to pause forever, you need to understand live, in the moment. If you miss a sentence because you're thinking about the last sentence, you're going to miss the next sentence too. Getting to the point when you can just do that is what we call instinctual understanding. You basically can't stop yourself from understanding, it just makes sense. All right. Now that we've talked about what listening is and why it's so difficult, let's talk about how to fix all of that. The first thing you're going to need to do is to make sure that you're hearing the language correctly. This is a lot like learning the alphabet of the written language, but in the spoken form. Imagine for a second that you were learning English, but you didn't realize that the letters A and O were different. You wouldn't be able to see the difference between caught and cat, or shot and... well, it'd be very annoying. Or the opposite happens, or they think that there is a difference between two things that for natives is just the same. It's relatively likely that something like this is happening for you. It might be a really big thing in the language that's very important, or it could be little small things, but subtle differences have compound effects. The best way to fix this is by investigating and being curious about what you're hearing and listening critically. I used to teach English online, and one of my favorite example sentences was always, "I'm going to go to the store," which is a very normal spoken English sentence that every single native English speaker I've asked understands on the very first try without even thinking about it. But all of my students, most of whom are intermediate or advanced, didn't really realize that we don't say, "I am going to go to the store." And some of them didn't actually understand what I said the first time I said the sentence. You can start with a little bit of investigation into the phonology or how the language works, but just observation is also really good. Pull up some audio and listen very carefully with a lot more focus than you usually do. And when a speaker says something that you don't really expect, even if you do understand it but you don't expect, investigate, ask questions. Why did they say it like that? Where's their accent from? Did they say sound A or was that sound B? I could ask a native this. Ask questions and be curious. Another thing that you're going to want to do is make sure that you can hear everything that you can already read. And the absolute best way to do this is by intensive listening, which I already made a whole tutorial on. A lot of people, even if they know what intensive listening is, don't do it because it can be a little cumbersome and kind of a bit slow. But that's also part of the point. When you're doing intensive listening, you're pushing yourself out of your comfort zone to do something that you're actively not very good at so that you can improve at it. If you don't seek out and target the things that you're not very good at, you're not going to improve, or maybe you'll improve really, really slowly. And this goes for language learning and pretty much the rest of your life. Before we continue, I want to talk for a second about our newest course. After the success of our Teach Yourself a Language course, a lot of people were asking for more, and specifically a listening course. And after months of hard work, it's here. We built this course specifically for all of you out there who are ready to level up their listening, but just need a little bit of help or guidance. Over the next 4 weeks, you're going to learn all of the skills and techniques to transform you from a potentially desperate learner into a confident listener. We cover in detail all of the activities and tactics you need to address all of those potential problems that I had talked about earlier in this video. While there might be a little bit of ambiguity in your listening material, there's absolutely none in the path you can take to become a great listener. And me and the other Refold coaches are going to be there alongside you just in case you do get stuck, to make sure that you can focus on the language learning and not the other boring stuff. If you're struggling to find the motivation or don't know what to do day to day, this is the course for you. Check the link down in the description or the pinned comment for more information. The next skill that you need is basically speed. You need to be able to do all that stuff that we talked about faster and more automatic. A lot like learning to play a song on the piano. You might start by going slow and making sure that everything's correct, but you can't really play it until it's at full speed, at tempo, and sounds actually good. And the best way to improve your effortless understanding is with free flow immersion. TV shows, in my opinion, are the best for this, but you can also do things like YouTube videos, movies, podcasts, really whatever. However, you need to be understanding what's happening, or else you're not really going to be learning and improving your skills. And this is one of the biggest pitfalls and traps that I see learners fall into. Free flow listening immersion is by far the easiest thing to do to get more time in the language. There is basically an unlimited amount of hours of content out there that you can just watch in your target language. And putting it on and then just seeing the pretty colors go by is really easy to do. But if you're just getting the vibe of what's happening and understanding maybe 50% of the words, you're not really solidifying your ideas and ability to hear the language. You're just getting more exposure. To get the most out of your free flow listening, it should be at a level where you can transcribe and understand about 80% of the words. This is a very rough estimate, so use it as a guideline, not a hard and fast rule. And also, just to clarify, you don't need to be able to do it live in real time. Transcription is a very difficult thing. But if you were to extract a regular, normal, let's say 5-minute segment of the video, you should be able to transcribe approximately 4 minutes of that completely accurately and understand 80% of those words. The point of this, of what I'd really call a mental exercise and something you should actually go out and test, but you could, is to make sure that you're doing content that is actually understandable and serving your understanding abilities, if that makes sense. If you're missing so many of the words that you can really only accurately transcribe 50% of what's happening, then you probably need to do more intensive immersion and really understand what words are being used. And if you don't understand enough of the words, what are you really listening for anyways? You're just looking at the pictures happen. If it's comprehensible enough that you still understand what's happening, that's a different story. Oh, and to note, if the language you're learning has a very arbitrary spelling or character system, you don't have to know all of the obscure characters. This is more about the ability to hear the words that are being said than necessarily how they're spelled or written down. So phonetic transcription is also totally fine. I find this to be a very useful mental model for understanding what kind of content is good for my level to immerse in just free flow style. Anything that's a lot harder than that, I would do more intensive style and make sure to check the subtitles, look up new words, and that kind of thing. Although, to end this segment, I do want to say that if a piece of content is technically too hard for you but brings you a lot of joy for relaxation or really whatever reason, that's more than enough reason to ignore all of that. Do what makes you interested and engaged in the language, but do keep in mind that you probably should also do some content that's a bit easier so that you can make more and faster progress. The rest of your ability to understand the language naturally and easily in lots of different situations comes down to that mental autocorrect. In your native language, you have a very strong mental autocorrect. You're able to listen pretty well in a place like a crowded, loud restaurant, over a terrible PA system, or meeting somebody with a new and potentially thick accent that you haven't really come across before. Your brain is so good at your native language that it can process and analyze possible structures, words, and meanings and just come to the right conclusion basically automatically. That mental autocorrect feature in your brain is still very much under development in your target language. You can't guess what somebody's saying if you've literally never come across that before. Your ability to understand brand new accents, unclear speakers, or terrible PA systems, which somehow still exist, will get better with time as you have more exposure to the language. But you do need that good practice of understanding 90 to 95 to 100% of what's being said, nuance and everything, in order to train up that mental autocorrect. You can also deliberately practice things like bad audio or new accents by doing things like intensive immersion with that, but that's not strictly necessary for building up that skill. If I was to summarize this whole video in one sentence, I would probably say something like, to get better at listening, do practice that pushes you outside of your comfort zone, but still allows you to learn. All right, well, that's all that I have for you today. I hope that I clarified a bit about why listening is so hard and how you can get better at it. And check out our new Level Up Your Listening course if you want more guidance on your listening journey. I will personally be there along with the other Refold coaches every single day to make sure that you can focus your valuable time and energy on actually doing the language learning than having to do the other boring, random stuff like picking content, understanding the activities, and that kind of thing. Link below. Have a fantastic rest of your day, and as always, happy immersing.
I'm here to drop some knowledge, listen up with your ears. I got a language learning method, gonna make it crystal clear. It's called Refold, the game changer, gonna blow your...
Can I help you? Don't move my camera. Lay down. No, lay down. He's being a pain, so I'm gonna record a little bit with him. He's walking, he's been asleep here all day, literally all day, and as soon as I go to record, he's like, ooh, let's do stuff. You have anything to say to the people? What was I saying?